The stray cat first appeared outside Fire Station 4 on a Thursday night in the rain. At first, nobody thought it meant anything. Fire stations collect strays the way warm buildings always do. Moths battered themselves against the bay lights in summer. Dogs sometimes wandered through the back lot in winter. Once, a goose had stood under the engine awning for 2 full hours during a hailstorm and attacked anyone who tried to move it. So when firefighter Owen Mercer glanced through the station's glass side door just after 11 p.m. and saw a small gray cat sitting under the dripping eaves, he barely looked twice. It was wet, it was thin, it had one torn ear and a white patch on its chest, and it was staring directly into the station. Owen was 36, broad-shouldered, perpetually tired in the way firefighters often are even when they're laughing, and not naturally sentimental about animals. He noticed things, though. That was part of the job. He noticed the change in smoke color before anyone else smelled insulation burning. He noticed the tone in a dispatcher's voice when a call was worse than the initial report. He noticed when a room felt wrong before a floor gave way under him. And that cat somehow felt wrong. Not dangerous, not sick, just wrong in the way a detail becomes wrong when it stays too still for too long. "You've got a visitor," he called toward the day room. Captain Ray Donnelly looked up from the paperwork spread across the table. At 51, Ray had the weathered face of a man who had spent too many years walking into other people's disasters and had developed the habit of assuming that anything unusual would become inconvenient before it became meaningful. "What kind?" "Cat." Ray gave him exactly 1 second of attention, then let the cat be a cat. Owen nodded and went back to rinsing out coffee mugs. 10 minutes later, the cat was still there. That was when he called Lena over. Lena Ruiz was the youngest firefighter on the shift, 27, quick, fearless, and entirely too willing to adopt trouble if it had fur. She came to the side door with a dish towel still in her hand and pressed close enough to the glass to fog it. "Oh," she said softly. "Poor thing." Outside, rain slid in silver sheets past the security light. The cat sat on the concrete pad under the narrow overhang, where the runoff from the roof splashed just inches from its paws. It wasn't huddled for warmth. It wasn't crying for food. It wasn't scratching at the door. It was just watching. Then it stood. It came right up to the threshold, touched the lower metal strip with one muddy paw, and looked past its own reflection into the lit station. Lena frowned. "That's strange." Owen nodded. "Yeah." The cat turned, pattered out into the rain, then stopped 3 yards away and looked back. Lena glanced at Owen. "You think it wants something?" He didn't answer, because even as she said it, the cat returned to the door, touched the threshold again, then retreated into the dark once more. The second time it happened, nobody laughed, not even Ray. "What's that animal doing?" the captain asked, getting up at last. Owen stepped aside so he could see. The cat repeated the same pattern. Door. Look inside. Retreat. Look back. Ray's expression shifted, not into belief, but into the more useful mood of mild suspicion. "Maybe it's been fed here before," he said. "Then why not cry?" Lena asked. "Maybe it's dumb." But the cat didn't look dumb. It looked intent. The tones went off before anyone could decide whether it mattered. A pickup had skidded into a drainage ditch on the South Road, and for the next hour the station emptied into wet headlights, diesel noise, rain-slick gloves, and bent metal. By the time Engine 4 returned just after midnight, everybody was cold, keyed up, and carrying the usual residue of someone else's near miss. The cat was gone. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The next night the cat returned. Same hour, same door, same rain. This time Owen saw it first again, and this time he didn't mention it casually. He just stood at the glass with his hand still resting on the push bar and watched. The cat's coat was darker when soaked, charcoal over the back and silver along the ribs. One flank looked muddied all the way up. The torn ear gave it a rough, half-finished look, like life had been forced to bite down on it and then got distracted. It approached the door, paused, looked inside, then turned toward the darkness beyond the side lot. Not the street, not the dumpsters, not the alley. Toward the old service yard behind the station, where a chain-link fence separated the property from a strip of overgrown weeds, drainage concrete, and the abandoned rail spur that no train had used in years. Then it came back to the door. Owen called Ray over without speaking. The captain joined him and watched the cat complete the pattern twice more. Door, yard, door, yard. Ray took a slow breath through his nose. All right. Lena, already halfway there because she had been paying attention from the kitchen doorway, said, "You see it too." Ray gave her a dry look. Hard not to. He opened the door a crack. The cat sprang back at once, but not in blind fear. It retreated only far enough to avoid the moving panel, then turned and ran toward the fence line. At the edge of the light, it stopped, looked back, and waited. Owen felt the exact same small, cold sensation he had felt on fire scenes just before finding someone trapped. Ray shut the door again. "No?" Lena stared at him. "No? We are not following a cat into a drainage yard at midnight in the rain because we've all suddenly lost our minds." That was a fair point. It was also the sort of fair point reality enjoys humiliating. The cat came back a third night, not at 11, earlier, 10:17 p.m. This time the rain was worse, driving almost sideways across the lot and rattling against the bay doors. The station was quiet. No active calls, no TV on, just the hum of fluorescent light, the soft static of the radio, and the restlessness of people too used to interruptions to ever fully relax. The cat appeared at the side door soaked through to the skin. It did not sit. It scratched once at the lower metal threshold, then again, then ran toward the rear fence, stopped, looked back. Lena put down the clipboard she was pretending to update. "I'm sorry, but this is not normal." Ray said nothing. Owen watched the cat return yet again to the door, touch the threshold, then rush back toward the dark yard. "Cap," he said quietly, "I think we should at least look." Ray turned to him. "At what?" "At whatever it's trying to show us." The captain's jaw tightened. He was a practical man, and practical men dislike sentences like that because they sound like the beginning of folklore. But he was also a firefighter, and firefighters live by another principle that mattered more. If something persistent keeps pointing at one place, you check the place. He sighed once, long and irritated, the sound of authority surrendering to curiosity while pretending not to. "Flashlights," he said. Lena moved first. They took radios, coats, and one trauma kit because habit makes people carry the tools they know how to use when stepping toward uncertainty. Rain hammered the concrete apron outside. The air smelled of wet asphalt, old oil, and river mud washed up from the drainage canal beyond the fence. The cat waited by the rear gate. The service yard behind Station 4 was not a place anyone liked after dark. It had once been part of a municipal works depot, then a storage zone, then a patch of nothing official enough to clean and too central to fully abandon. The station fence ended at a sagging gate, and beyond it ran a narrow path between weed-choked concrete, cracked retaining walls, and the old rail spur swallowed now by rust and vines. The cat slipped through a gap in the fence and vanished into the darkness beyond. Lena looked at Owen. "We're doing this," Ray muttered. "Apparently." They squeezed through the gap one at a time. The path beyond was slick and narrow. Rainwater ran in shining threads through the broken concrete and down toward the storm channel that cut under the old rail embankment. Their flashlight beams bounced off wet metal, weeds, and the black mouths of drainage openings. Nothing about the place looked like somewhere a sane person, or a cat, would choose to spend time. Then the cat appeared again, 20 feet ahead, standing on a low retaining wall. It looked at them, then jumped down, then moved toward the drainage channel. This time, even Ray did not try to pretend it meant nothing. "Keep together," he said. They followed. The storm channel was a concrete trench 6 feet deep with runoff rushing along the bottom, hemmed by steep walls green with moss and rain slime. Normally, it was just an ugly piece of forgotten infrastructure. In weather like this, it became dangerous fast. The water wasn't river deep yet, but it was rising, carrying bottles, sticks, and clots of leaves toward the tunnel culvert beneath the rail spur. The cat ran along the channel edge and stopped at the tunnel mouth, not inside, beside it. Then it began making a sound Owen had not heard from it before. Not a meow, not a hiss. A raw, rasping cry that sounded almost human in the rain. He was already moving before the others reacted. He dropped to one knee at the tunnel entrance and swung the flashlight beam into the culvert. At first, he saw only fast water, concrete, and shadow. Then something caught the light. Pink. Fabric. Another sweep of the beam and the shape resolved into a small arm wedged against the tunnel wall above the waterline. Owen's entire body went cold. "There's someone in there." Ray was beside him instantly. "Adult?" "No. Kid." Lena was already on her radio. "Station 4 to dispatch. We have a child trapped in the drainage culvert behind the old service yard. Repeat, juvenile victim in active storm runoff channel. Need full rescue response now." Inside the culvert, the child moved weakly. A face turned toward the light. Little girl, maybe 6, maybe 7, mud-smeared, terrified. Her raincoat had snagged on rusted rebar where an old maintenance joint had broken open inside the culvert wall. One leg was pinned between debris and concrete. Water surged around her boots and rose higher every few minutes. Owen shouted into the tunnel, "Hey, can you hear me?" The girl tried to answer and only coughed. Rain roared overhead. Somewhere behind them, the first siren started up from the road. Ray assessed the opening in 2 seconds flat. "Too narrow for gear first. We get verbal contact, keep her talking, hold until rescue team." Lena, kneeling at the edge, called out in the voice firefighters reserve for children and the nearly lost. "You're okay, sweetheart. We see you. Help is coming." The girl cried then, small, exhausted, barely above the water noise, and somehow that was worse than silence. The cat remained at the culvert mouth. That part never left Owen. It did not run when more lights arrived, did not vanish when boots pounded over wet concrete and rescue lines came out. It stayed crouched on the retaining wall beside the tunnel as if the rest of them had finally caught up to the only fact that mattered. The child's name was Ava Sinclair. She had been missing since late afternoon. Her mother thought she was with a neighbor. The neighbor thought she had already gone home from the community center. By the time those assumptions collided, night and rain had swallowed the easier hours of search. Police and volunteers had been checking parks, porches, alleys, and school grounds. Nobody had thought to inspect the derelict drainage system behind the old fire station because nobody knew a child had wandered that far. Later, they pieced it together. Ava had followed the cat. That was the first shocking part. She had seen it near the community center lot shortly before the storm broke, and because children are small and the world is still mostly story to them, she followed it through the back lane, then farther than she meant to, then into the service yard where the rain and dark confused everything. She slipped on the wet concrete edge above the channel and went feet first into the culvert entrance. The torn rebar and debris trapped her before she could be swept deeper under. The cat had not let her into danger intentionally. That much seemed clear. But once she was there, trapped and crying in the storm channel, the animal had remained nearby long enough to understand that something in its world had become very wrong. And then it had gone to the place where humans came and stayed there until somebody followed. The extraction took 23 minutes. Too long for comfort. Too short for tragedy. Exactly the sort of brutal focus span that people later compress into one breath because memory hates the stretch between fear and relief. The water was still low enough for Owen, clipped on a waistline, to enter the culvert on his stomach while another firefighter anchored his legs outside. The debris pinning Ava's leg shifted once and nearly sent everybody into panic. Lena kept talking the whole time. Ray coordinated space, timing, body angles, and the incoming rescue techs with a voice so calm it bordered on supernatural. When Owen finally cut the raincoat free, eased her leg from the trap, and pulled Ava into his arms, the child locked both frozen hands around his neck with astonishing strength. He backed out inch by inch through filthy water and broken concrete until Lena took the girl and wrapped her immediately in blankets under floodlights that turned the whole ugly yard into a stage no one had asked for. Ava cried harder then. Her mother, who had arrived during the last minutes of the rescue, cried harder still. Ray sat back on the wet concrete and looked suddenly older than he had an hour earlier. Owen, who had done dozens of rescues in his career, realized only afterward that his own hands were shaking, and the cat was gone. No one saw when it left. That later became part of the story, too. Not because disappearance made it mystical, but because it felt appropriate in some deep, irrational way that the animal had not stayed for gratitude or spectacle. It had done whatever it was doing, held its place against rain and dark and indifference, and vanished once people took over. By morning, the whole town knew. A stray cat sat outside the fire station in the rain. One firefighter decided to follow. A missing child was found alive in the storm culvert behind the old service yard. The story moved through text chains, breakfast counters, the mayor's office, the elementary school, and every social media page in the county before noon. Photos of the service yard were shared. Photos of Ava in the hospital were not, because Ray threatened bodily harm to anyone on shift who let that happen. The local paper wanted quotes. 2 regional stations wanted interviews. Animal behavior experts from 3 counties away suddenly had theories. The theories all sounded reasonable. Cats are highly curious. Cats respond to crying. Cats can associate humans with help or food. A distressed animal might repeat a learned route between problem and attention source. All of that may have been true. It still didn't touch the part that haunted everyone who had stood in the rain watching the cat return to that door again and again and again. Ray, who hated all sentimental framing on principle, gave exactly one statement. "I don't know what the cat meant," he said. "I know what it did." That line appeared in print the next day and followed him for months. Ava recovered. Bruising, mild hypothermia, a badly strained knee, and one deep fear of drains that no one thought she needed to get over quickly. But she recovered. 2 weeks later, still moving carefully and wrapped in an absurdly large pink coat, she came to the station with her mother to say thank you. She brought a drawing. In it, a gray cat the size of a German shepherd sat heroically in front of a red fire engine, while a little girl waved from inside a sunshine yellow blanket. The proportions were terrible. The feeling was perfect. Lena pinned it on the wall near the coffee machine. Ray pretended to object and then never moved it. For a while, the firefighters looked for the cat, not formally, not with traps or posters, just with the half-hopeful attention people give to something unfinished. Owen left dry food near the fence gap twice and pretended it was because raccoons would get into the trash otherwise. Lena kept checking the side door around 11 without admitting why. Even Ray, on one late shift in November, stepped outside in sleet and stood for a full minute looking toward the yard before going back in. 3 weeks after the rescue, Owen finally saw the cat again. It was just before dawn. No rain this time, only cold, clean darkness and the blue light that comes before morning. He was alone in the apparatus bay, checking oxygen seals on engine 4, when he glanced toward the side lot and caught movement near the fence. The cat sat there, dry, still thin, torn ear clear in the pale light. It looked toward the station for a long second. Then, without hurry, it turned and slipped through the gap into the weeds beyond the old rail spur. Owen went after it as far as the fence and stopped there. He could have called, could have followed farther, could have tried, finally, to catch it. He didn't. Some things lose shape when you grab at them too hard. He just stood there with one hand on the chain link and watched the darkness where it had disappeared until the first tones of morning traffic began in the distance. When Ava was older, people in town still told the story about the cat outside Station 4. Some made it bigger, some made it softer. Some insisted the animal had known exactly what it was doing. Others insisted instinct was enough, and people only decorate what they don't understand. Owen never argued either way. If anyone asked him directly, he always answered the same. It kept coming back until somebody listened. For him, that was the whole truth. Not miracle, not myth, just persistence. A small wet animal at a firehouse door refusing to let the night keep what it had almost taken.